17.4 million Brexit voters were betrayed today, partly through a bunch of North London Remainers and Brighton-based centrist dads who never accepted the biggest democratic vote in the history of the country can save 10 minutes at a passport queue. Keir Starmer's government sealed their Brexit backtrack, then tweeted this ridiculous post to troll the nation. It read, "Brits travelling to Europe will now be able to use e-gates at passport control, so you can start your holiday sooner." They are literally taking the mickey out of you. The only time I've ever had to queue at passport control since Brexit is in Madrid a few weeks ago, when they suffered an electoral blackout. I have never, ever experienced a problem in my life, and I know I'm not alone. Even if it was a problem, is it worth apparently cheating not only 17.4 million Leave voters, but our entire fishing industry too? Because Keir Starmer's surrender deal will see EU trawlers given continued access to British waters for another 12 years in what could possibly be the biggest sellout of British industry ever. And from next year, our fishermen would finally, after years of waiting, have been able to keep every last piece of cod, kipper, mackerel and halibut to themselves. Now, though, we're going to continue to be pillaged by the French until 2037, who, let's be honest, are doing everything in their power to bring this country to its knees. And it doesn't take an idiot to work out what's going to happen to our fishing industry during that time. The current lot, unfortunately, will sadly die off or retire, and there'll be no incentive for their offspring or the like to carry on the mantle. We will shortly become an island without a fishing industry, an island surrounded by water without a fishing industry, and become the biggest laughingstock on the world stage. Our political editor, Christopher Hope, asked the PM today why he decided to kill British fishing.
Scottish Fishermen Association or Federation say your deal is a horror show, far worse than Boris Johnson's botched Brexit agreement. Are they right? Have you been stitched up like a kipper by the European Union?
Does it bring down bills? And I think it's really important to see the reaction of supermarkets, of Salmon Scotland, to begin to answer that question, because they are celebrating this because they know it will reduce prices. Does it boost jobs in security, in defence, steel, of course? And then, of course, does it take vital measures to help protect our borders? And it answers all of those questions, which I think are fundamentally important for working people. Thank you.
And it didn't take long for Boris Johnson to pipe up and ask the very question every normal thinking person had on their lips.
Compare the growth rates of the European Union and the United States of America or other developed economies where they have a more liberal, a more free market, a less regulated, less high tax approach. That's where the growth is. Why is Starmer taking us back into the sweaty embrace of Brussels when it's massively uncompetitive, low growth and low productivity?
Well, let's be honest, is it a surprise Keir Starmer's done this today? Because this is the man who called for a second Brexit referendum time after time because he didn't like the result the first time round.
Already voted, I think, 3 times as a party for a second referendum with a 3-line whip behind it. And so I can tell you today, an incoming Labour government will legislate for a referendum immediately on taking power and hold that referendum within 6 months. Labour must support all options remaining on the table, including campaigning for a public vote. That was our commitment. We would call for a general election if the deal didn't get through, but that if that didn't happen, the option of a public vote ought to be available.
Yeah, he's a Europhile who seems to care more about impressing his human rights lawyer mates in North London and EU squares in Brussels by proving he's a man of the world stage than he does Britain. But it isn't just fishermen thrown under the bus today. Labour spent most of last year consistently saying it had no plans for a youth mobility scheme with the EU. Well, they were telling porkies about that too, because today it's been reported that a European Youth Experience Scheme, where European youths aged reportedly 18 to 30, and by the way, I don't consider 30-year-olds youths, would be welcomed en masse to the UK on a capped and time-limited basis. This is freedom of movement by the back door, something Keir Starmer has always said would never return. Let's be straight. Time after time, this country's voted for strong borders and reduced immigration. It was only 2 weeks ago the nation spoke again at the local elections, desperately hoping our useless, self-centred politicians would finally listen. But in my view, this government doesn't care about the majority. It doesn't care about pensioners. It doesn't care about farmers, as we've learned. It doesn't care about business. and now it doesn't care about fishermen. It seems to me that Keir Starmer cares more about maintaining the status quo and the international order than he does his own country. And if you don't believe me, listen to the man himself.
Let's just ask you quickly. You have to choose now between Davos or Westminster.
Davos.
Why?
Because Westminster is too constrained.
There you go. And while it's clear Keir Starmer hasn't learnt his lesson from the local elections 2 weeks ago, he will certainly pay the ultimate political price come the general election in the years ahead. So where does that leave Britain? Well, in my view, Boris Johnson said it best.
He's turning this country once again into the orange ball chewing leather trust gimp.
Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former Conservative Party chairman Sir Jake Berry. Good evening, panel.
Hello.
Welcome along. Oh, wow, what a day. Carol Malone, what's your thoughts? Was it a Brexit surrender, a Brexit betrayal?
Was not a Brexit reset, it was an abject surrender. You know, Starmer's a traitor to democracy. You know, he's
a traitor.
He's a traitor to democracy. He's a liar. This man lies as easily as he breathes. He promised faithfully he would honour the referendum result, and he's lied. And he's shown contempt for the 17 million people who voted for it. So he sold out the fishermen, he sold out the farmers, he sold out the pensioners, he sold out the disabled, sold out the Chagos Isles. You know, it is astonishing. Norway renegotiates its fishing deal every single year with the EU. Why couldn't we do that? Why do we have to hand over 12 years? I mean, everyone, you know, the Tories, I think, and probably the rest of us thought it was going to be 4-year maximum, and even that would be hellish. But he's actually sold it out for 12 years, which is beyond belief. And everything that he says we're getting, there is no guarantee that we're going to get anything. We're now, as Boris just said there, we're going to become a rule taker now, rather than a rule maker. Our rules on energy and food are going to be set by the EU. That's precisely why people voted to get out of it. And he's put us right back there. And we're right back on the route to rejoin now.
And what are we getting? In terms of money for the economy, £9 billion worth of trade, which is absolutely paltry.
Which is nothing. You said before, it's peanuts.
Well, and they haven't disclosed how much we're actually paying. So we've also got the bizarre situation where we are going to be paying hundreds of millions of pounds back to the EU. Well, everyone remembers 350 million a week, that famous number that was the net contribution by the United Kingdom to the EU.
He got more than 350.
We're going to be paying hundreds of millions of pounds. And of course, Keir Starmer and his government won't tell us how much it is. It's a big secret. By the way, we're the ones going to be paying it. It's all a big secret. And on this point that Carol makes about free movement, let's put that into context. In a country that is being invaded by migrants, is putting massive pressure on our public services. They have just given visa-free access to up to 80 million people in Europe.
They say it's going to be capped. They say it's going to be
But they won't say what the cap is. They won't tell you how much we're paying for it. They won't tell you what the cap is. If it's such a great deal, come out and tell us all the details.
And also, by the way, I said in the introduction there, 30-year-olds are not youths. There's nothing stopping these people coming here on visas. I don't know how old you are, Benjamin. Benjamin, let's talk about our fishermen. And it's not fisher them before you start, it's fishermen.
Except Keir Starmer did say fisher women today.
I know, I saw that. I mean, again, it sounds like a trivial point, but that just shows the kind of person we're dealing with. You know, having to put in the caveat of fisher women is just exemplifies.
Well, I find it very transphobic. What about our transgender fisher people?
Yes.
He missed out the fisher people. He should resign immediately.
Well, fisher them. Sam Smith,
fisher them,
infamously on the One Show, says fisher them. Anyway, Benjamin.
Well, fisher happy, I think, is what most of them will think today. Because look, let's look at the reality.
What have they got to be happy about?
So Jake, when he takes a breath, will remember that the numbers that are going to go forward for the next 12 years of how much EU can fish in our waters is just the same as it was under Boris Johnson's deal. The difference is that it would have come up for renewal every 12 months.
Which would have expired in a matter of months.
And that would be a hell of a situation. And let's look at the reality.
Hang on, before you move on and just shrug that off, which would have expired in a matter of months.
Yes, and renegotiated.
As the only person sat round this sofa who actually negotiated Britain's Brexit deal, I was in the cabinet at the time, that was a high price that we paid as a transition period which would see Britain get its Brexit deal through. This is now being given away for 12. He's got no mandate to do that. 12 years. That's longer than even Tony Blair was Prime Minister of a country. It's three parliaments.
It's three parliaments. Sorry, Benjamin, continue your point.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the Boris Johnson deal put a border down the North Sea and handed Northern Ireland to the EU. So I don't think that's less of a concession. The Theresa May deal collapsed a government which caused years of turmoil, nearly let Jeremy Corbyn become Prime Minister. I don't think that was an acceptable concession. Now, actually, 70% of our fish is sold into the EU. And what these changes do is make that easier for them to sell their produce. And what we've got is so much less red tape. Conservatives should appreciate this, that what businesses have been saying for years, small businesses and big ones, is that the amount of red tape and the amount that slows down getting products across the border, if they can at all.
Why is that red tape there? Why are the EU so vindictive
because we left
to include
the EU
all that
and put up loads of barriers?
No, the EU put up loads of barriers.
Well, I mean, that's their right, that's their right to do because we were outside their economic agreements. And so the fact is that, the fishing industry makes about £3 billion a year. This will make triple that for the UK economy. And when you've got companies like Marks and Spencer that had to cease trading in France because it couldn't get things across the border fast enough,
so how do we deal with the fishing industry then? Because they're getting shafted. There'll be no one to replace them.
It will die, just like farming will die. I mean, you said it in your intro. The older generation now, they will die out, and maybe their sons and daughters may not go into it because of this. But the thing is, I don't get Starmer. It's like he wants to be chucked out of power. Today he just gave Reform a standing start to win the next election. Farage has already said, I will reverse all of this if you make me Prime Minister. I will kick it all out, make me PM. And people, I've been reading online today, families who've voted Tory for years have just said, that's it now, we're going for Reform. Not going wrong, because the Tories are a busted flush as well. So people are now going to vote for Reform.
You're the people that wanted no deal at all, that would have collapsed the UK economy.
Benjamin, this is why we're using this.
If Brexit was so good, then why are food prices up? Why is immigration up? Why is energy prices up?
Why are their economies in the toilet?
You're going to let me answer. You've asked me seriously. Food prices are up. Well, as far as I'm aware, France, Germany, Italy, and Portugal haven't left the European Union, and their food prices are up more than ours.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, France, Germany, Portugal haven't left the European Union. They're suffering with migration in the same way. They've got but Ben, you're completely wrong. Prices have gone up across the European Union because of COVID. It's nothing to do. The correlation between food prices going up is not the same thing as causation. The food prices have gone up because of Ukraine and Brexit. And actually, you say big business welcomes this. Of course they do. Big business always welcomes uncontrolled migration to the country because it's a lot cheaper to give an immigrant a job than it is to train a British person.
You're saying those companies that can no longer sell British products to the EU, they should be happy with that
Keir
scenario.
Starmer has with this, and he has no mandate to do it, is that he entered the negotiations saying, whatever you say, I won't walk away from the table. At least with the no-deal Brexit, you say, you wanted a no-deal Brexit. No, we didn't want a no-deal Brexit, but we were prepared to hold it over the head of the European Union to get the right deal for the British people. Starmer has just surrendered.
The deal we've got on fish is the exact same number that Sir Jake's government got.
For 12 years.
Carol, last word to you.
This is a betrayal of democracy.
Right.
People voted to leave the European Union, and now we're going to be
Benjamin, Labour got a lower vote share than Corbyn. It was a loveless landslide, as it's been described. Comparing that to 17.4 million people who voted leave, the biggest democratic vote in the history of this country, which has never, even by your government, Sir Jake, I'll say that, which has never been carried out because there's been not a genuine Brexiteer anywhere near government or in Parliament. We've never had a majority leave Parliament.
You had Liz Truss.
Liz Truss?
Yeah, you had Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, OK?
And she was shafted by the establishment.
Two ardent Brexiteers and one person who actually...
So actually, that is a really good point. This project to force Britain back into the EU
and you tanked
is bigger.
Have a breath, please. I want to hear from Sir Jake.
Ben, I think you should apologise for interrupting me, but let's not make a point of it. But actually, this project to force Britain back into the EU is actually bigger than Keir Starmer. He's the useful idiot who's done the establishment's work for him. But never forget that London, North London, the establishment don't like the fact that people across Britain in coastal communities who'll be decimated like Blackpool and other coastal communities had the pluck to stand up for their nation.
Exactly.
Keir Starmer's knocking you right back down.
How dare they vote to leave the EU gravy train and live a life on their feet instead of,
we were all
subservient to Europe.
stupid and we were all racist, according to them.
Right, moving on. And just as a final passing note before we move on to the Great British Giveaway, I will say, Carol, you're absolutely right. This is a death wish for Labour.
Completely.
Because, Keir Starmer spent a week pretty much trying to backtrack after the local elections, saying, we're going to get tough on migration, I'm going to sort it out, I'm going to protect Britain's borders. He's just undone all of that, whatever.
We just reintroduced free movement.
Yeah.
God forbid we might finally get economic growth.
Right.